What keeps you going? Where do you get your motivation? Whether you just want to be the best you can be or the best there ever was, we're here to keep you inspired. Conversations with today's top fitness influencers, coaches, athletes, and bodybuilding professionals. This is Inspired Fitness. Here's your host, Sean Feuderer.
Welcome to the Inspired Fitness Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Flexogenics. Every year, thousands of people undergo unnecessary joint and knee surgeries. Flexogenics was created to offer the very best in non-surgical solutions that allow you to get back to doing the activities you love. Before deciding on surgery, schedule a consultation and explore non-surgical options. I have personal experience with Flexogenics to treat osteoarthritis and tendon damage. I can confidently endorse their hyaluronic acid and PRP solutions. Okay, so here we are again with another episode of the Inspired Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things fitness related. I'm joined today by my co-host, IFBB Pro and Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, Kimberly Helm, along with our very special guest, owner of SGP Fight Club in Syracuse, New York, Sara Grace Nickle. You can find Sara on Instagram using @SGP Fight Club. Hello, ladies. Thanks so much for being here today. What do you say we get into it?
Sounds good.
So Sara, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about you, kind of what's your story, your background, your family, your hobbies.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York, upstate New York. So we're about 4 hours outside of New York City. I did move to New York when I was a teenager, but most of my life was spent here. I started in martial arts when I was 6. My brother was a black belt and I really wanted to get into karate really bad, but they wouldn't take me until I was 6 because I was just super hyper and they just didn't want me. So I started when I was 6 and it took me a really long time to get my black belt, longer than most people. I had a really hard time with the runs, but I really excelled in the combat portion of it. So I really liked to spar. I was 14 when I got my first degree black belt. I started teaching when I was 12. So I was a red belt when I started teaching. And then it just kind of evolved from there. I didn't get my second degree black belt till I was about 26, 27. Oh, wow. I took a few years off for college. So probably like 18 to 24. I didn't really train, didn't really do that much. And then I got back into it. My brother owned a martial arts gym. I started teaching for him. I started getting into the combat side of things. I started boxing and then I wanted to compete. So I didn't do my first official fight until I was 30.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I did a lot of sparring competitions as a kid. I mean, I was competing all the time, but I didn't actually get into the ring until I was 30. And then it just kind of evolved from there. After a few years, I wanted more and I decided to start my own program, my own gym, and wanted to get women in the ring. I realized I was the only female everywhere I went. Every single gym I went to, I was the only female. Every fight card I was on, it was just me and my opponent being the only females. I didn't have any women to train with. There was no way for me to gauge myself. I didn't know how good I was because I was sparring grown men all the time. So I wanted to start a female gym and get other women in there and then have them able to work with each other and kind of see where they stood. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah. So what was the first discipline that you learned in?
I started in Kempo karate.
Okay. I'm a little familiar. But Kim, you're a practitioner in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I think you've also played around with some other disciplines. What's your experience like?
I really enjoyed Muay Thai. I really got into Muay Thai quite a bit. I liked being able to use elbows and knees and legs and kicks. So I had a really good time with that. And that actually played really well with Jiu-Jitsu itself, because there's actually a lot of similarities to me. When I was training both at the same time, I seemed to grow exponentially faster in both arenas. So I thought that was, it sounds like you've done a little bit of that as well, because you were kind of all in, right, Sara, on all the different.
Right. Yeah. We're Muay Thai based. So my gym was Muay Thai based, but I did jiu-jitsu for a few years. It was the same issue though. Like I was the only woman. Yeah. And it was difficult, as I'm sure you know. And it's just kind of,
that's kind of a theme in combat sports, isn't it? There's just not a lot of women who are doing it. What is your feeling on that? Do you think that is more so because women don't know what they're capable of, or do you feel like it's too violent, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit of both. I think that, there's not like a lot of safe spaces for women to go. Yeah. And again, like I said, like gauge themselves. Like you're probably working with men all the time. And until you're
Yeah.
rolling with a female or, competing with a female, you don't exactly know where you are. So if you constantly are going to a gym and there's only you or one or two other people, it's hard to really know where you are.
So you've done a handful of fight cards over the past few
Yeah.
years. What's it like getting in the ring? What's that feeling that you get the first time that you step in the ring?
It's never different. From the first to the fourth to the sixth is the same feeling. It's like you're scared, you're excited, you're scared, you're really excited, and then you're really, really scared. I get super nervous. I have bad anxiety. And I think after the fact, it's like, wow, that was really cool. But like leading up to it, it's pretty stressful.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of the catalyst. You mentioned your brother. Sounds like he's older and he was into martial arts and that kind of started you on the path. But was there anything from your early childhood that kind of pushed you towards combat sports?
I just fell in love with the sport itself, that I wanted to kind of see the different avenues of it. So I kind of explored all the different sides of it. So I started off as training, and then I got into teaching. And then I wanted to learn the different styles. So I've trained in multiple different styles before. And then I wanted to get into the combat side. And now I'm back into the coaching and the gym ownership. So I think that was just what pushed me, is kind of learning the ins and outs of the sport and all the different ways of doing it.
And then you've had, like we've said earlier, you've had a number of bouts. You've been on a number of cards. What do you consider your biggest accomplishment in the arena?
I think being able to fight in 3 different styles. I've done K1, which is kickboxing, Muay Thai, and boxing. So being able to go in and do those different styles has been super cool. I haven't gotten MMA yet. I don't think that's going to happen, but at least those 3 were a good accomplishment for me, I think.
Quick question. So do you feel that there are certain styles of fighters that you are better prepared for? As in, if somebody's a heavy wrestler, do you feel like that is more of a challenge for you? Or do you feel like that's where your niche is? Or what are you looking for when you're going up against a fighter? How do you prepare?
So I'm just stand up. So I wouldn't necessarily go against somebody who was a wrestler, because we just stay on our feet. I mean, I take a look at everything. So if someone's got a martial arts background, that they're going to, if they have a karate background, they're going to be a heavy kicker.
Right.
Taekwondo background, they're going to be a heavy kicker. Or if they're, they have a boxing background, they're probably just going to be using their hands a lot. So kind of just studying my opponents and figuring out what their backgrounds are has really helped me.
Well, Muay Thai is heavy on the kicks. Right?
Yeah.
I've fought some guys in my martial arts career who were, learned in the discipline Muay Thai, and their kicks hurt a lot more than people I've faced in karate and Taekwondo. But
it's fun though, right?
It is. You've gone from learner to instructor to fighter to gym owner, and now you're training other women.
Yeah.
Right. What does it take? What do you find is most gratifying when it comes to teaching other women what it is that you do?
I'm watching them reach their goals. I mean, it's like the best feeling. It's way better than being in there yourself and, accomplishing your own goals, helping somebody obtain a goal that they didn't think that they were going to reach, and then having them reach that. It's the best feeling. I had a girl she's a woman. She never trained a day in her life, and she just did her 4th fight 2 weeks ago. So having her start with us from the beginning and go through learning how to even like throw a punch to just getting through her 4th fight, it's pretty great.
Yeah, I imagine it is. But it's also pretty difficult to coach people through the disappointment of defeat. This is something that,
It happens. Yeah.
It absolutely does. Being able to effectively coach somebody through the emotions of that defeat and then come back ready for more.
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing to do. How do you find that experience?
It's extremely difficult. And I've been there as a coach. I mean, I've been there as a fighter too, but I think as a coach, I coach a little bit differently, I feel like, than the way I was coached. It's more like a family atmosphere for us. I really get to know these people and get to know their families, get to know their lives. So I have an emotional investment in them too. So when they don't win and, they're down and stuff like that, I'm really there for them, not only as a coach, but as a friend, and try to help them build themselves back up. And I think that helps. Something I never had. So I'm trying to help them in a way that I didn't have the help.
Talk to me a little bit about that. What do you mean you didn't have the help, the support?
So I actually never really had a coach for any of my fights. I mean, I did have a coach, but it's complicated. So I came from a karate gym, and, the person who was training me at the time, they had never fought. So their way of coaching wasn't really kind of helpful for me. And like I said, I didn't really have a lot of women to work with. And I'm not trying to bash anybody, but it was just more of kind of me figuring it out on my own. I did 2 fights under this person, and then I just decided that I was going to do it on my own. So I had 4 more fights where I really just coached myself. My husband helps me, trains me, and holds mitts for me. And I have people I can spar with, but I've really kind of, my last few fights have just been me.
And, I understand where you're coming from with that, right? Because I've been in the martial arts business over a 20-year period, in and out. I've been an instructor. I've never been the owner of a gym or a dojo, but I know the guys who have been in that space and the gals, a lot of times they don't want the liability that comes with full contact instruction.
100%.
So it's moved a lot more towards point-based sparring, at least in my experience. That's what I've seen. And Kim, what's it like for you? I think you train with the Silverback crew, right? And BJJ?
No, I train with a different crew, but the BJJ, I mean, are you looking for insight as far as how we train?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really say no contact when it comes to jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah. No, it's like you're going to get uncomfortable whether you like it or not. You're going to get uncomfortable and put in some really awkward positions. And, that's something that you have to get over. And for a lot of females, and Sarah, I'm sure you've probably come up against this when you're first getting somebody entrenched in it, is that you have to get over your fear of being close, right? And your fear of what's going to happen. And again, to me, BJJ, the reason why I originally was attracted to jiu-jitsu was because of from a self-defense perspective, right? I want to make sure that I feel comfortable, feel prepared, feel safe, and the people in my family around me that I'm able to help, protect them as well. It's one of those things where you want to be able to feel comfortable going up with somebody who's a bigger size than you. If the circumstance were to be real out in a parking lot somewhere, that you want to know that you can hold your own. But at the same time, you have to find the right kind of training partner that you can trust so that they don't hurt you.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things I think that we've seen with females is that, and with anybody, whether it's male or female, you really have to find somebody who's able to control their behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think that for me is the hardest part, is that you want to feel like I got this, I can go fast, I know how to do this. You get amped up, you get enthusiastic, and you want to execute quickly and be like, I know how to do this, I got it. But yet when you go too fast is when injuries often happen and mistakes happen. And then you hurt somebody you don't mean to, and you're like, oh man, So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is finding partners that are available, and then learning how to, the people that you do and don't want to roll with, or the people that you do and don't want to fight with, to your point, right?
And somebody at your skill level too, because somebody can be above or below, and that's hard as well when you're trying to compete.
Yeah. It is, because you want to go with people who you want to go with people at your learning level, but at the same time, you want to have the availability to learn from somebody who's more advanced. And so, and those people get tapped on the shoulder all the time because everybody wants to tap on the people who are more advanced and use their skill set and learn from it. So, but it goes both ways. And I'm one of those who, hopefully my biggest focus is on holding myself accountable for making sure I'm doing everything I can to train properly, to eat properly, to have my mindset proper, so that when I'm going in there, I'm being the best fellow athlete as I can be and still learn something.
So you just touched on something that I think is important, right? And that's the aspect of nutrition as an athlete. Sarah, I'll kick it over to you. Before you step into the ring, you're doing months and months of prep work. How are you eating during that period?
Depends on how much weight I have to cut. That's the biggest
That's right.
thing.
Yeah.
The weight cut is the hardest thing. And I think, as women, it's harder, especially the older we get. Yep. And me not starting until I was 30, the weight cuts were tough, but my last fight was in February, and I started, I think, 20 pounds heavier than what I had to fight at. And I had 6.5 weeks. So, I mean, my diet was about 1,200 max a day that I'm intaking. I'm a vegetarian, so it helps just eating fruits and veggies and tofu and stuff like that, trying to get my protein intake as well. But then you're cutting so many calories when you're in a fight camp. I mean, I'm training 2-3 times a day. So it helps. I mean, at first it takes a while to see that come off, and then it just starts to fall off as you continue to go through the camp. Yeah, I mean, nutrition is a huge part of it when you're trying to lose weight for a fight.
Kim's in the bodybuilding space, and as I talk to others who are in that world, right, where they're cutting weight for getting ready for their stage presence, and you're down to the day of weigh-ins and you're 8 pounds overweight, you have to go sit in a sauna and lose 8 pounds of water weight. It's probably very similar for you.
My sauna's right here. It's my lifeline. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I understand.
So nutrition, it's important no matter what, right? So we like to preach about healthy habits, and eating is a big part of that. Kim's actually been my coach and trainer in the past, and she knows how terrible I am in that space. I don't have the
He admits
discipline.
it. This is the good thing about Sean.
At least he admits it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not overweight by any stretch, right?
No, not at all.
But the discipline of food is a very tough thing to do.
Yeah, it is.
And
especially when you're into a habit of eating a certain way and you got to break that habit.
Absolutely.
This is one of those topics I can go on about for probably hours on end because I find the human body absolutely fascinating. Like, I mean, it's probably one of the reasons I love sports so much is just, it's incredible to me what we can do. Nutrition aspect, it's amazing to me that you can do everything the same exact way for every single fight in your case, or for me, every competition, like you can do everything the same way and still, it won't always give you the same results, right? Environments change, your stress level changes. And it's like, I think that's just, it's always something that you have to tweak, right?
Yes, always.
So that kind of brings me around to really what I want to get into with this is we start talking about the discipline in nutrition, but then, discipline is something that we apply to whatever sport it is or athletic activity that we're participating in. And so for you as a fighter, as a coach, you have to come with a certain level of discipline, like mental fortitude. Mm-hmm. And then you have to instill that into the people that you're training with or training, right? And that can be a very difficult thing to do. People learn at different rates, at different paces, and they have different attitudes. What's your experience there? Like, what's that been like for you to go through the highs and lows of other people's level of discipline?
That's a really good point. So everybody is different. And I've kind of learned that through owning the businesses. I had one fighter to start with, and then her personality, was so different than someone else who came in. And I had to adjust the way that I coached and I trained to this person's personality because it didn't work the way that I was trying to do it. And I had to change it a different way. And I think structure and schedule is so important. I'm very transparent with all of my fighters. I'll text them every Sunday and say, this is what your schedule is going to be, but I need you to follow up with me too. I need you to say to me, hey, Sarah, this isn't going to work this week, or hey, I'm really struggling with the cardio this week. I'm with the lifting or with whatever it is. And then I can adjust the schedule. But I think clear communication with whoever I'm working with is the best way to go because everybody's personality is different. And I'm not for everybody. And I know that. So I've got to kind of adjust how I am for certain people.
And Kim, I imagine that translates pretty well into what you do, right? Working with different levels of professionals in the bodybuilding space.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as a coach, one of my biggest spiels up front, I meet somebody or I do a consultation or have a new client, is making sure that there's understanding that there is a contract on both sides. Yeah. That it is, it's one of those things where I have to show up as a coach and I have to make sure I find the time to do that and to give my full attention to those clients, and they have to show up in full accountability as well. And so honesty is, especially when you're dealing with things like nutrition, where you're messing with somebody's metabolism, as a female more so, we have a little bit more volatility with that. We have a little more sensitivity around hormones than males do. And there's a lot that goes into that. And if somebody is not being completely transparent on what their intake is, you can make an adjustment that isn't appropriate. And so that has a negative effect. The biggest thing is that, yes, let's make sure, that number one, if it's virtual, do we have progress pics where we can see, hey, here's what I'm dealing with that looks the same to me, but maybe maybe as a coach, you might see something just slightly ever so different, that you might be able to pick up on. And even if you don't week over week, you will month over month. So it's really helpful to have visuals and a lot of conversation in between. And Sarah, it sounds like you're kind of the same way. Like, I don't take on a whole lot of clients because I invest so much in it. And there's no, for me, it's not hey, I can only text you 10 times a month or, whatever the case is. Like, as much communication as is needed to make this go forward, I'm in, So
yeah, quality over quantity.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't want to do it if I can't do it that way. Like, it took me, a little while to figure out what the best setup was to make do with that and figure out what the best balance is to make sure I still have to have time to train and so on and so forth, and what's the right number of clients to have so I give them attention. So it takes a little bit to get into that. And Sarah, it sounds like maybe you've gone down that path a little bit too, trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I think it's hard too when you can't be with your students every second of the day.
Yeah.
Like, you're with them as much as you can be, but they have to do things on their own and you have to trust that they're doing it. And when the weight isn't falling off or the progress isn't being made, it's hard to know okay, are you really doing what I'm asking you to do, or are you struggling? And that's where I need the communication to be like, hey, I'm having a hard time with this, or hey, I just didn't do it. Just be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Like that's okay. Let's figure out a way we can get you to do it. Yeah, I think communication is the biggest part of it.
I know sometimes I wish we could just have like a compound to be like, come move in for like
Right.
6 months, like move in. I'll show you how to do nutrition and train. We'll do it together. Like, if it was doable, that would be awesome. But that would be,
I think there's a huge benefit to that for, I'll call it immersive training, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to take somebody like me who has a regular career, a 9 to 5, we'll call it, and try to teach them how to eat properly.
And the family.
And raise a family and have hobbies and, everything else. It's, the gym is just something that kind of happens. And then nutrition kind of falls to the wayside, right? Because you've got to eat what the rest of the family's eating or what the kids are eating. Or you have to be very disciplined about the fact that you don't. You mentioned, as women, nutrition has an impact. Training has an impact hormonally. That's got to be tough. Stress levels, food, the amount of rigor that you're putting your body through, it affects you as women. What's that like for you, Sarah, as a fighter, as a fight trainer?
Well, I think it's difficult. And, like you guys were saying, you can try one thing and it's not going to work for every single camp, for every single competition. And I've had times where I've 1,200 calories through the whole camp, working out 2 to 3 hours a day, but the weight's not falling off like it needs to fall off because of hormones or because of stress or because of whatever else. So one fight, I might have to do a crash cut where I'm sitting in the sauna for 2-3 hours. I mean, not at a time, but like, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, no water for 2 or 3 days. I mean, you know how it is. It's tough. And then you're depleting yourself for the fight, and you have 24 hours to kind of eat and hydrate, and it's hard because it's every competition is different. You never know how your body's going to react. And it's the same with the girls who fight under me. I mean, they're all older like me as well and older than me. So it's the same thing. Their weight cuts are hard, but it's different every time. So sometimes we might have to adjust certain things. We might have to do the sauna more, or we might have to take out carbs, or we might have to add more cardio. I think it depends on the person and where they are in the camp and where the fight lands and what their weight is. It's a lot of different factors.
Kim, isn't it amazing how Sarah's description of prepping for a fight is so similar to prepping for a stage show?
Yes, I was thinking the exact same thing when she was talking. Like, yes, there's so much that goes into it, and you get better at it the more that you do it, right? You get better at it, but it also takes time with the client. It takes time to figure out them. It's not something that if I were to, for my trainer, because I have somebody hold me accountable for what I do when I compete, in bodybuilding and things, so that I have another pair of eyes on me, because I know I'm going to be my own worst critic, so I need somebody else to also provide input there. And I don't expect him to hit it out of the park on the first competition either, because it's a learning experience for both of us. So it's one of those things where, okay, we're going to grow a little bit together. You kind of have to be patient with that. So, and I do encourage people that too, when you get a new coach, you have to allow them the opportunity to get to know your body as well and what it's like, because when you go through prep, you're doing something that coach has never gone through with you, and your body might adjust differently because maybe you're 15 years older than his average client base, or maybe you have health issues that, might change those things, or stress levels that change those things. But it's funny how a lot of that goes into the same thing with the prep that we do for bodybuilding. Now, our prep, and I'm curious about, Sarah, what your time period is for preparing for a fight. So like for us, we usually, I would say on average, most people do about 3 months is probably the average, like a 90-day kind of prep. So what do you look at for a fight?
It depends on who they're fighting and kind of
interesting
and their skill level. So like my last fighter, we really only had 6 weeks because she wasn't matched up until 6 weeks prior. She was kind of in a camp about 2 weeks before that, so we could say 8, but it's usually between 8 and 10. If it's somebody who's going to be a more challenging opponent and we know ahead of time, we'll do a 12-week camp. Yeah. And then the weight is just going to depend on what weight they are at the time, and then what weight they're going to compete at. So if they're 10 pounds over, I'm not even having them think about cutting weight until a few weeks prior. Yeah. And usually for me, when I'm cutting, I'm about 6 to 7 pounds over on the Monday before I got to weigh in Friday. And then I'm starting to take water weight off and stuff like that. Because you want to be the heavier person as a fighter when you get into that ring. You want to obviously be low on the scale, but then carb and all that stuff out because you want to keep your muscle mass.
It's got to be a little bit different post-event for a fighter as well. I imagine. So after you do weigh-ins in the bodybuilding space, you're still working on maybe cutting off a couple of points of body fat. You want to get as lean as possible. But after you've done weigh-ins as a fighter, I imagine you're eating as much as you can. Maybe you're doing IV therapy. You're taking in as much water as you can. That's maybe one of the key differences here.
Yeah, and you got to be careful too, because you don't want to overdo it and make yourself sick and not able to compete. And I think a lot of fighters get to that point because you're starving and you're dehydrated. So you're slamming Pedialyte and you're eating pasta and cake and everything you can think of, but then you're feeling like crap the next day. So there's a fine line between like carbing up and rehydrating, but not like overdoing it either. You want to come in heavier, but you don't want to come in sick either.
Yes. Yeah, we have that same presence in the bodybuilding where it's if your body's for the last 8 weeks, let's say, has been used to having chicken and rice and broccoli, basically, for the most part, right? I mean, some variation, obviously, to that, but for the most part, it's been pretty steady. And you haven't had anything else outside of that. You haven't had anything artificial. You have had no artificial sugars, no sugar in your diet. Everything's been very strict that day before the show, just because you want to carb up. You're not going to go and eat like 10 Snickers bars because it probably won't go well. Like you'll probably hold a lot of water, and there'll be all these other things that you might not do well with, or you'll have some kind of sugar crash afterwards. So, but it's very similar. It sounds like to certain aspects of it. Obviously, you have to be much more mindful because in what you do, you are physically exerting your energy in a very different way when you're fighting another opponent versus a bodybuilder being on stage by themselves.
So, Sarah, what do you struggle with the most in the combat sports space?
I think that the biggest struggle, in the combat side of things is like the opponent matchup, especially for a female. For myself, when I'm competing, making sure that I have the right matchup, but also for my fighters, it's really difficult too, because it's so hard to match women and it's so far and few in between. And sometimes you're going to travel 6-7 hours to get a fight, but you don't want to take a fight just because you haven't fought in 6 months or you haven't fought in 8 months. You want to make sure it's the right matchup. I think that's the biggest challenge in combat sports with women across the board. I think even in jiu-jitsu, it's the same thing.
Is that what makes it difficult? Is this physical differences? And
I think so, because I compete. I'm 5'9" and I compete around 145. And usually the girls that I'm fighting, which is an advantage for me, are shorter than me. Those girls don't want to fight someone like me because I'm 5'9" and I have a longer reach. So it's difficult for sure.
Yeah, I think from a jiu-jitsu perspective, and I'm on a couple of like Facebook groups, for jiu-jitsu practitioners and things like that. And there's one that I'm on that's for females only. And you will always see ladies going on there. Sometimes it's master, sometimes it's younger, but usually it's, a little bit older or a higher belt level. When they're like, hey, is anybody coming out to this? Hey, I would love to fight someone. Like, I would love to have a match. Is anybody planning on coming, or would you like to come? Almost really like asking, I wouldn't say begging, but like, hey, I love what I do. I love doing this.
Yeah.
Can we get some more bodies on the mat, because they just don't have anybody. They'll show up and then there's nobody to go again.
Yeah. I'm in a lot of those groups too, like book a fight type groups. And there's one girl who was posting probably for like 4 months, like, hey, I just want anybody. I'll cut weight, I'll gain weight, I'll do whatever. Somebody bite me.
Let's make it happen. Yep.
So what would you say to younger girls and women who are thinking about getting into this space? What would you say to them to get them inspired to take that step?
I would say just do it. Just start training. I think training young is the biggest thing. It's so much harder, as you get older to learn something new. And I think we can all learn something new, but if you want to compete and it's something you want to do in the future, start now. Start exploring it too. If you try one style and it doesn't work, try something else. That doesn't work, try something else. I think just being able to get in there and start training is the biggest thing. Everything else falls into place as it goes.
I mentioned earlier that I used to teach martial arts. I got into it because my son I think he was 6 or 7 at the time. He wanted to start training. I got re-involved and became an instructor, and I did that for I don't know, 10 years or so. But what was compelling for me was these young kids coming in. Yes, they're learning how to, do these different martial arts forms and spar. And yes, they might get hurt every now and again, but they're learning discipline. They're learning self-control. They're learning valuable skills that they can take into their future, and apply in their education in school and as an adult and so forth. And so I encourage parents to consider putting their kids into martial arts programs just for those reasons. We want to reach out and inspire young girls and women to learn these types of skills, not just for self-defense, but as a sport. One of the best ways to do that is through social media. And you've got a pretty decent presence on social media. How has that benefited you and the building of your brand, SGP Fight Club?
Social media is the reason why I'm in business. I have an online business and I have an in-person where I teach. So I teach online classes, in-person classes at a gym as well. And every member that I have just about is from social media. So my Instagram, I've got a decent following. I've got a little over 10,000. All of my online members has come from Instagram, every single one of them, other than my personal friends locally. And then my Facebook, most of my members have come from Facebook for my in-person classes. So it's done a lot. And without social media, I wouldn't have a gym. During the pandemic, it's kind of when I started posting fitness videos and advertising my classes. And this woman who owns a gym in Australia, she owns the same type of gym I own. She reached out and said, "Hey, I'm really interested in learning more about your program and more about you. Can I take a class?" So she joined and she took a class and she said, "I love your classes. Can my members take your classes?" So now most of my online members are Australian.
That's fabulous.
And it's cool. It's just, opened up so many doors.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So social media collaboration allowed you to grow your business exponentially.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
fantastic.
Literally the reason why I have a business.
Well, Kim, you're on social media as well, but your business grew more from person to person, word of mouth, traditional word of mouth.
Yeah. And I admittedly have not given a whole lot of attention to my social media presence. And I'm really bad at video because people ask me all the time, "Hey, can you video when you train or when you prep and when you do all these things?" And I get so focused when I train and when I prep and do things that I really have to set time aside to give that extra attention. Because when I'm doing it myself, when I'm training myself or when I'm in the zone, I'm just so focused on just what I'm doing. I don't want to be distracted by anything else. So I have to get better at balancing that. But what has worked well for me is that, especially as a posing coach in bodybuilding. So I work with, men and women in different categories in bodybuilding to have stage presence when they go to a bodybuilding competition. How do you show your muscles to the best of your ability? Everybody's body's shaped differently. And how do you show what your strengths are versus your weaknesses? And so I've been able to make really great relationships, partly because I'm very active in the bodybuilding community, but I've been able to make relationships with certain coaches who I have faith in, that they treat their clients well, they do things in a healthy manner, they execute well. So I can refer people to them who want to do a competition, they want to get prep, they can go to these folks, and then these coaches also refer their clients back to me. It's a very good working relationship. So what's happened for me is that now I have a X number of coaches that I work a lot with, and we can refer clients to each other, and it works really well. Both of us get benefits from it, and we both have faith in each other's skill set.
Building of the relationship, that's the key for both methods. Sarah, obviously you have to have, by nature of the sport that you're in, relationships with different fight associations. Who are you currently working with?
Well, we work with a lot of different promotions, locally and not locally. So whenever I go to any of these fights at all, locally or if we're traveling, my biggest thing is to build connections. So I'm constantly building connections with other coaches and other fighters. I've done that, and we've kind of built these connections with other gyms too, locally. And some are about an hour away, 30 minutes away, or not, or whatever. Sometimes I'll bring some of the girls out to other gyms so they get training with other women or men, and then they can kind of work with different skill sets. And then we've kind of, through these people who have these gyms, we've learned about other promotions, and then we've gotten connections through them. And then I've reached out and said, "Hey, can we get on your fight card? I know you through this person. Oh, this person, that's awesome." So then they'll connect us with them, and then they'll connect us with somebody else. So building relationships is huge, no matter if it's at a gym or at a fight card or wherever I go. I'm always trying to build a connection. Hey, what's your Instagram? What's your Facebook? follow me and then send me a message. And
Yeah, that's smart. That's the best way to do it.
So what's next for you as a fighter?
So right now I'm currently pregnant with my first child.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, very nice.
I'm 5 months pregnant and I'm still training every day. So that's been a huge challenge for me.
Yeah.
And I'm coaching every day, coaching 6 days a week, online and in person. And I'm the main instructor. I'm the only instructor. So I'm hands-on, and that's been a huge challenge. So right now I'm focused on having a baby and then we're going to take it from there. And it's been tough because, you know, as an athlete, you're so used to your body looking a certain way and you've worked so hard to get it to work a certain way. These changes have been difficult, trying to keep the nutrition as well. So my focus probably after I have the baby is to get my fighters back in and just line them up and get them fighting.
Yeah.
Wow, 5 months along. That may be one of your tougher fights.
I think so. It's been tough. Yeah.
It is difficult when the body changes like that. And I have not been through that. And I've worked with a ton of clients who have gone through, you know, when I worked with them to prepare their body before they have a baby, and then to try to get stable again after they have a child and try to build up their strength again. And the process, you know, I can completely understand how there are so many challenges when it comes to your body changing and what it looks like. And just because you're not, you know, showing shredded abs anymore doesn't mean that you are out of shape and you don't have any muscle. It plays with your head, but when you have a strong mindset like yours, you know, I know. And you have to probably like, okay, woosah, and, you know, remember where your basics are. But I'm sure, you know, it sounds like you have a really, really strong mindset. And so you know better than anybody to get back to this is part of the process, and your body will go back to what it knows how to do after you have the child.
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest struggle is like, obviously I have to modify things, and the scale has been like, I'm so obsessed with being on the scale all the time and weighing myself all the time that I've kind of tried to have to tell myself, like, listen, you got to stop. And I'm still lifting weights and I'm still hitting the bag and doing all that stuff. But it's hard when you can't do everything to your highest level and you're used to doing it for so long.
Slowing down is one of the toughest things.
And I'm older, so like I'm older than the average person having a child. So that's also like been kind of tough for me too, because I know that it's going to be harder for me afterwards for sure.
Listen, Sarah, I'm going to be 50 this year and I still want to have a baby.
Oh my gosh.
We'll chat.
Holy cow, you look great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But you know, you're doing good, woman. You're doing good. Stick with it. You're doing good.
Thank you.
So we'll have another little fighter on our hands.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
That'll be awesome. Little baby gloves. That'll be so great.
Well, we know what to put on Sarah's registry for baby gifts. So you talked a little bit about your husband earlier, kind of being your support structure, your trainer, and well, obviously your partner in life, and now father to your child. If I remember correctly, you're just recently married, just in the past few years. 2
years. Yep. We've been together about 9, but we just got married 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this isn't new.
No,
a long time coming. So what's it been like for you having him in your corner as you've kind of helped, you know, built your brand, and you know, the two of you working together? I imagine that's got to be inspirational for a lot of couples.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. So he's been there with me from the very beginning. So I was obviously training when he met me for my 2nd degree black belt. He's been with me from my first fight to my last fight. He's physically been in the corner for 2 of my fights. And then he was my head coach for this last fight. So it's pretty great. He has a martial arts background as well. So he grew up training, and he just never got into the combat side of things. It just wasn't his style, but he loves to train. So he's got a lot of knowledge, and he helps me with my fighters as well. So he helps me corner for the fights and train my fighters. And it's great because you don't really have to leave your house. You can just stay home and have your coach there and train and get the knowledge. But it's really nice to have your support system along for the ride.
I commend both of you because I'm sure that there are challenges that come along with that. And it sounds like it's a really great and strong relationship that y'all have, that you can provide support for each other, you know, kind of like off the screen and on the screen, you know, both in both manners. There's a ton of people that I've worked with who, they tried doing it with their, with their person, and it just didn't work out for them because, some people don't do well with that and they provide more of a support role. And some people, it's the best way ever, so it's cool to hear you talk about it. So it gives people an understanding that, hey, it is doable. So when y'all first met, when you're first getting to know each other, did you feel like that was a path that you were going to take with him?
I don't think so. I mean, he had, like I said, he had a background, and then he kind of got more into it because he knew that was what I was immersed in.
I see.
And if I think he kind of felt like at the time, well, if I didn't start to get into it, then when was I going to spend time with her? And then I think he started to get a huge passion for it too. I mean, he's watching UFC fights every single time they're on, every single promotion he's watching, and he's learning and he's still training. So I think it's not the easiest thing in the world to work with your husband and partner.
Sure, I have no doubt.
Not always sunshine and rainbows, but it's great to just have him along for the ride. It's been great. Yeah. I don't know if he'll be involved forever.
Yeah.
Because he has his own things going on, but it's nice to have him a part of it now, as long as he wants to be.
Well, I think that's great. Especially as a husband and father myself, for him to be there for you in that regard, I think that speaks volumes to his character. So
for sure.
Good on him.
He's a good egg. We'll keep him.
I like it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to touch on?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you covered all the bases.
We'll leave it with this. Thank you to you both for a very inspiring conversation today. Join us next time on the Inspired Fitness Podcast, where we talk about everything fitness related. Till then, here's us wishing you a healthy mind, healthy body, and healthy habits.
Thank you for listening to Inspired Fitness, leading you to a healthy mind, healthy body, and healthy habits. To stay inspired, visit us at inspiredfitness.net. That's INSPIRD.net. Until next time, stay inspired.